Okay, it's June 30th. Welcome to Leviathan News. And we're back in the gutter, boys. It's over. Let's pack up and go home.
Goodbye, folks. Was great.
The SEC has said that spot Bitcoin ETF filings are inadequate. This news actually just came out this morning. It was published by the Wall Street Journal. Obviously, somebody got some insider information from the SEC to paper of record. And they said a recent wave of applications filed by like BlackRock and Fidelity and others are not sufficiently clear or comprehensive. And part of it has come down to this idea of information sharing between all the exchanges and the ability of these offshore exchanges to operate without being in the SEC's like watchful eye, right? So there were some interesting comments actually. So Nick Carter, who is one of my more favorite commentators, came out and said that, like it's crazy that the SEC is demanding spot ETF issuers of Bitcoin to come in. And he said, can we just remark on the lunacy of the SEC demanding that ETF issuers have knowledge of virtually every trade in a global spot commodity traded in every country on earth, including P2P and held by 50 to 100 million people? He's like, this is not a standard that any commodity ETF has ever been asked to meet. It's fundamentally an unreachable standard. So it's an absurd question to ask.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like, blue team says red team sucks. More news at 11.
Is it though? like the biggest off-chain exchanges, so Binance, OKX, will never submit to these information sharing requirements that the SEC has. And so even if all of the trading from Kraken and Coinbase and the other ones are shared, there's still a huge amount of exchange that happens overseas, right? Offshore as well too. And it's not like we're looking at, when you look at like copper trade or gold or something, a lot of that happens outside of the US's like reach as well too. So I don't understand where the hang up is.
What do you mean? Like, we've been talking about this for months now. Like, they are anti-crypto and want control and don't want people involved. And like, that's a political view that I think honestly, like, I don't agree with, but I understand. And BlackRock and Fidelity came out with their view that like the Bitcoin ETFs are fair game, and then SEC is saying no. Like, I don't know. Again, red team says blue team sucks. More at 11.
Yeah, exactly.
Battle of interests, like there is some kind of game being played that like I don't think we're being told like everything as it is. There's all kinds of backlash behind stage, and we're just witnessing the surface of it. We're not seeing what's actually going on.
But are regulatory agencies supposed to be like red team, blue team?
Nothing is supposed to be red team, blue team, but our society is breaking down, and that's all we have left.
I understand. I get it. I know what you're saying here, but these are supposed to be independent organizations.
Yeah, but I mean, just like, I'm sorry, but like, we lost that as a country, like probably in 2000 with Bush v. Gore, but like everything's politicized, everything.
Okay. Well, the Jake Travinsky.
Well, can I make you feel better?
Yeah.
About this one? So it's not as bad as it got read. It's definitely not as bad as like if you look at like the chart, you look at that candle, that is a disgusting, 31 to 29K kind of candle. It's not that bad. It's not that bad, mainly because what are they saying in this? I think they know they're overmatched. I think they realized the big boy is now here. The biggest of all the boys that there are, BlackRock is the biggest one, and now we can't dick around anymore. We were kind of like stonewalling this thing. It's no good, So they are just trying to be a little bit nitpicky. But actually, the thing that they're asking about, they're saying it's inadequate. That's the headline. That's the kind of eye-grabby headline. But actually, it's, wait, you didn't name the exchange. Once you, okay, not naming the exchange, that's kind of reasonable. Like, that's a reasonable thing for them to ask prior to approval. And so I read this And from reading like some of my more legalese fluent friends and their interpretation of this, and some of these are people who actually worked on some of the previous filings throughout the years, they're reading this as this thing's inevitable. This thing is coming, and this is just like Gary's doing what Gary wants to do, but like the actual things they're asking for here don't seem that unreasonable. This thing is coming, and you can't stop it. And like you might slow it down, but you can't stop it.
Well, the Blockchain Association is trying to stop it. So yesterday, Jake Travinsky came out and said that the Blockchain Association published a document saying that Gary Gensler should recuse himself as he has wrongly prejudged that all digital assets are securities. So he said that every SEC enforcement action must follow the Wells process. So in this case, the SEC commissioners are meant to act as neutral arbiters, impartially weighing the evidence and arguments presented by the SEC staff. And when it comes to digital assets, the chair Gensler has made several statements that have shown his bias and non-neutrality in all of this. So he said that in February 2023, Chair Gensler said, everything other than Bitcoin, you can find a website, you can find a group of entrepreneurs, but at the core, these are tokens. But at the core, these tokens are securities because there's a group in the middle. So Jake Travinsky goes on to say that this is wrong. It's a well settled that determining a particular transaction falls within the scope of security laws requires careful analysis of the facts and circumstances. You cannot throw blanket statements like these around. Every single instance has to be judged and litigated for or against. And so these broad statements clearly show that Chair Gensler has prejudged the facts and law in every case involving digital assets. And so they're calling for him to recuse himself.
Blue team says red team sucks.
Yeah. Well, like sometimes, but I think for a change, we're actually saying in a way the same thing. Like there's a whole battle of different interests. I definitely agree with John here. By the way, I think that now when the big boys are in the game, it's pretty much a matter of time. I personally have a feeling that Gensler will not be the head of the SEC once the ETF is actually approved. But of course, it's just a guess that I'm making, and have nothing to base it on in the actual ground. It's just how I'm feeling.
So in other news, the Coinbase is actually offering some decent yields. So if you have not seen, they're offering 4% yields on USDC held in their exchange, probably because they swap it into USDC and then they're turning around and putting everything in treasuries. So Coinbase is having to compete quite heavily to maintain its relevancy and keep money inside of its exchange.
I mean, weren't you like basically begging for this like 3 months ago with like wasn't Frax and the whole Paxos thing? Like I thought this is what we were begging for. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely what we need. I mean, rates have to adjust. There's no way that you can like lend money at like 2 to 3% when you can just turn around and invest it in risk-free treasuries at 5%, right?
Yeah, Rex quote what?
No, risk-free treasuries, not Rex quote.
No, he's reading the comments. He's reading the
someone in the chat.
Hold on.
Yeah. So there's something sort of interesting about this. Like, I'll admit that I have a Coinbase account. I generally try and keep money out of it. But this is a business Coinbase account, right? It's very tough to find a business banking account that gives any sort of yield. Like personal accounts for banking will give 4% yield. But for business banking accounts, the best I'm able to find is like 1.75%. So I was actually like, okay, I'll do the opposite of what I advise people to do, and I'll keep some money on exchanges, and I'll keep my USDC on Coinbase and get twice the yield because it's like makes perfect sense. So I interpret this as like Coinbase is going to have a hefty legal bill coming up, and they want as much money on their exchange as they can have.
Yeah, I honestly I think it's like we just saw how many like real businesses that like we like that were holding like big amounts of cash at Silicon Valley Bank, right, and every other bank, And like you do that because you want to maintain like liquidity, but you also, you know, like I just, whether or not you like this or not, I just see like our industry becoming more like the way the real world works. And like, I think that's a good thing.
I think it's inevitable.
For sure.
You know, I think it's inevitable. And I think that, you know, it's kind of like all the different actors will have to reassess in order to survive. So for me, it's like just another small step with an entity like Coinbase that, you know, for now we call it an exchange, but in 5 years from now, maybe it's like a bank, it's a neobank, it's a huge, you know, people are trying to adjust in order to both be compliant and have a strong legal case, and also be able to provide the services they want to provide. And Coinbase is such a huge and important actor in it that I definitely think that they have a very good position, them and some of the others, to become you know, just a new kind of banks in about 5 years, a decade, whatever.
Yeah. It's just there's a lot more competition now, and there's also a very profitable business to run a stablecoin as well too. So Coinbase wants all the money that it can get, because rates are extremely high.
Yeah, I mean, it's only profitable while we're in this like historic reflection off of the COVID lows. But
wait, are we all like thinking that this is like in competition with the banks? Because I'm seeing this more as this is in competition with Tether, right? With USDC, you know, market cap dropping so much recently. I think this is their way to try and get, and they've done this the whole time, right? Where like Tether is used, Tether has volume, and USDC is where you park your cash. That's what people do it for. And they turned it down, and I think, you know, that completely killed whatever they had built. Because you saw the market cap go down, and now I think I'm going to be watching the market cap and see, okay, what does this 4% mean for people holding USDC?
yeah, I mean, I think that I agree that it's like more a like attempt to strengthen or bolster themselves against Tether. But like that being said, like, you know, I don't run like a business account or like have, you know, but if I did, like I could totally imagine a world in which, like, let's say I have like X amount of dollars in my TradFi bank account. Like, why not just hold it in, like, you know, I can just see it, like, at the same time that this is about bolstering the Circle product, this is also about like Coinbase evolving from an exchange to like a, you know, holistic full circle financial services company. So I think it runs both ways.
I just think there's a lot of demand. Like if you get, there's been a huge drawdown in USDC, obviously because of the Silicon Valley Bank stuff, but additionally because, you know, like why would you keep your money in stables right now when you could park your funds in a 30-day treasury that is earning like 5%? It just makes no sense. And so the rates are high enough that it's just sucking liquidity out of the system. And so this is the only way that Coinbase is able to maintain relevancy and keep. No, you don't think so?
No. It's a very simple explanation. Think why they picked this number.
Four.
I love it.
4. There we go. All right. Well,
The message.
that the actual right answer comes at the end from Garrett. Garrett knows what's up. All right. So Camelot DEX is requesting 2 million Arbitrum distributed.
12 million Arbitrum.
Yeah, well, it's 2 million a month, 2 million Arbitrum a month for 6 months to distribute as liquidity and integration incentives, essentially cementing themselves as like the primary DEX on Arbitrum going forward. And so they've requested that they receive this so that they can drive a ton of liquidity and help Arbitrum builders.
Interesting. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, good for Camelot for going after it. I don't real like we should all be trying to get as much free money as possible. I have no problem with that. I am curious to see what like the DAO community reaction is, but like what I actually think that means is off-chain's reaction is, and just to see if like they're interested in, you know, like putting direct financial incentives against like pretty like mercenary stuff. And so yeah, I think the story here is much more in the reaction than in the proposal.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. Because I've seen all kinds of different takes, like, for it and against it. Because in a way, I definitely agree. Some say that Camelot are doing like a good thing for the community because it's all going to be distributed for LPers and stuff. And others say, it's just a way for them to maintain to strengthen their status as the strongest DEX. And I can definitely understand that argument as well.
Do you guys use Camelot? Have you
Only for one trade that I had to do, and there was a lot more liquidity out there, but I didn't use it as a launch pad like they did with some of the tokens. But I don't know. I'm hearing good stuff about it, but I didn't participate in any of the launches myself.
So right now, Camelot has like 2.1 million ARB in its treasury that it's using for governance. It's going to commit that to the multi-sig for the entire 6-month duration. So like on a month-to-month basis, it'll have committed more than it gives out. So they're going to be used for the pools. I think there's some questions about like which pools are going to be endorsed, about how much are going to be endorsed, as always, since it is kind of mercenary.
So I think this is probably one of the most contentious. I mean, actually, does anybody else have any thoughts first?
No, go ahead, Wayne.
Derek,
Go ahead.
do you have anything?
I definitely want to know what Wayne is thinking.
So like, I think that the first thing to see is like, what is the DAO saying, right? And I think there was like 50 to 70 different replies within like the first 6 hours of this being posted. So it's awesome. And I don't know, it's pretty cool, right? It's that like people do give a shit. And they are writing these like long ass replies. There are people on both sides. And here's my take, right? So the people who are saying no are basically saying this is a lot of money, right? But yeah, sure, $12 million is a lot of money, but they're not really putting it into perspective, right? I mean, we've seen it's like tokens. We've seen some insane sort of deals like this before. So I don't think that's exactly valid, but I get what they're trying to say. But I think the really cool thing to kind of focus on is what DeFi Advisor said, right? Like these guys, they could say, oh, let's take 12 million and then give 1 million to the team and then they're not doing any of that, right? None of it's going to the team. None of it's going to any advisors. None of it's going to any, none of it's like, none of it's being, going to any, like, I don't know.
So I got a couple of questions for you, Ben, right?
Yeah.
So is giving out the ARB as LP incentives the best method for driving usage in the Arbitrum ecosystem?
So the thing about like these kind of pools, right, everyone kind of needs to understand first, really, is that without incentivizing long tail assets like this, it's very difficult to get long tail asset liquidity, right? So if you're a protocol on Arbitrum, one of the great things that you can do now is you can enter a partnership with Camelot or any other DEX, but let's stick with Camelot, I guess, because we know it works. And you don't have to give your own token, right? You can enter this partnership on the roundtable with Camelot, and you don't have to give your own token, and you can get a lot of liquidity. So we've done it with Umami. We don't have to, emit any of our tokens, and that's a great thing. And there's like other protocols that have done it. So these long tail assets it's just inevitable, right? Because who is gonna provide as much liquidity as is needed for these big sellers, and even people who want to buy the token? Who is gonna provide that liquidity? And I think there's only two options, and that's Uni V3 or Camelot. And the great thing is Camelot does have a Uni V3 style LP function now. Yeah. And I think, and I hope that Camelot will be using some of their incentives and slowly moving toward this Uni V3 style thing, which means that the incentives are even more effective, right? So if you ask me between Camelot or another fork of Velodrome or a different fork of XYZ protocol, I'm going to say this every single time, right? Because they have that Uni V3 functionality. You can get like 10 times more effective liquidity, meaning you need 10 times less tokens, So that's the way that I think about it. And everything
Would
else,
you say that Camelot is best positioned to distribute this ARB if they were given it?
so yeah, so in terms of a DEX, right? Like as an Arbitrum Foundation, I think everyone needs to think of what are the protocols that we want to that really needs to be bolstered. And I think that a native DEX where you can have long tail assets and you can have price discovery is really, really important. And you know, Curve fulfills that role for stablecoins, but it doesn't fulfill that role for everything. And GMX fulfill that role for big assets, but it doesn't fulfill it for everything. Only DEXs like Camelot or other DEXs like that kind of fulfill that role. That's why I'm kind of like sitting there and I'm thinking this is the most effective one that I've seen. I think it's a great.
So let's talk about the downsides though. Like if Camelot's selected, there's other exchanges out there. There's like Trader Joe, Maverick, Unisa V3, just to name a few, right? Like if you're selecting Camelot and essentially like enshrining it as the primary liquidity hub for the Arbitrage ecosystem, like what does that mean for all these other exchanges?
Okay, so that's a really good point, right? And I think that's the point that the no side has a really good argument for, right? It's about like what kind of competition do you want to bolster? But I think it should kind of be based upon not just everybody gets the same thing, right? Because that wouldn't make sense, right? You can think about like, oh, what would be the perfect way to do this? Everybody getting the exact same when Camelot is like 10 times bigger, that doesn't really make sense. So should it be on TVL? Well, even TVL, it should kind of be on efficiency of TVL. And I think in terms of that, there are a few candidates like Maverick. I haven't really looked at, but I think Maverick is doing like Unisa V3 optimization, right?
Something like that, yeah. Well, don't you think we could solve this with some sort of like gauge style system? If we're going to distribute 2 million a month, can we just have a monthly vote to have people vote with their ARB to say like, where do you want the ARB to go?
I think the problem with gauges is that you need a set.
It's not even. I mean, gauge in the sense of like, vote for
which
like,
protocol, right?
Yeah, protocols. Now you're not voting for pairs. You're voting for protocols here.
Yeah. But it's the same of like I would have like prefer as a little ARB emitted as a bag holder of ARB, right? Or as anybody who is a shareholder of ARB and has a say in this. You want as little emissions as possible, but you also want to bolster the important protocols as possible. So it's a give and take. And if you do a gauge mechanism, you're going to have to say, oh, let's emit 30 million per week. And then the gauges will decide who gets what, but you need to kind of fix that 30 million, which is just, in my opinion, kind of like, I want to be really stingy with it, right? So, and I can't do that with gauges. That's my problem.
So if you want to be stingy with it, like how is the 12 million over 6 months the right number?
Well, okay, so I think the question of whether or not it's the right number is a very good one, right? That's the thing that here, if you're in this, I think everyone's seeing this as a hard 12 million. Will they emit it all? That's not. I don't think that that's the case, right? They put, I think, a lot of Grail up to emissions, but they didn't use nearly all of it, nearly any of it, right? They pretty much just. And I think they would have the same kind of situation with the ARB. Even with the V3, it will be even more efficient, so they would be using even less. But on the other side, the proposal can always, the discussion is a discussion for a reason, right? And 12 million is a number that they've put. If the DAO feels that 8 million is more important, more of a suitable number, whatever it may be, it's. The discussion is there for the reason to have a discussion, right? That's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I think we can have a conversation about is the number right? Like, look, the reality is that whoever wrote the Camelot proposal just put a number down, right? And then we can like argue about that, and that's fine. But like, I think we can talk about gauges and but honest to God, what is the difference between this proposal and voting for gauge, voting with gauges on a protocol by protocol basis, right? Like this is literally exactly the same. It's just less automated. And my question for you is like, let let's just imagine a world 1 year from now. And like, let's say that Camelot was given this incentive, and like, because they got this incentive, they're able to dominate Arbitrum liquidity to the point where like 1 year from now, 90% of Arbitrum liquidity is on Camelot. The next one is Uniswap with 5%, and then it's like a tail after that. Do you think that is good, like a good result, or something that like needs to be actively thought about when we're talking about this kind of incentive?
Okay, so in my opinion, the way that I look at it, right, and maybe people see it in a different way, but the way that I see it is the incentives are not forever, right? And the proposal makes that very clear as well. This is a 6-month schedule, 2 million per month, 12 million total. This is not forever. And so in terms of longer term sustainability for any protocol, I think the most important thing becomes how effectively were those emissions used, and did it, like the point of using emissions is to sort of like, you're a plane on a runway and you want to take off. But when you're in the air, you don't want to be like wasting fuel. You want to be in autopilot mode, right? And that's what it is about. If it's a bad protocol, it will take off and then immediately crash once the emissions are gone. But if it can get into that autopilot mode, that's where that's where the emissions come in handy. And if that's the case, then that means that they are using the liquidity most effectively, not that they use the emissions most effectively. If there was oh shit, okay, wait 1 second. If there was
But that's the question, though, is like, are these short-term incentives going to pay out more than the investment in the long term? So like, if they put 12 million into Camelot, is the long-term benefits for the Arbitrum ecosystem going to be greater than that? Like, will the amount of liquidity that's built up during that time period significantly be more than the 12 million that's put in, right? Like,
and this is where I think the numbers game is important, right? Because how much you give, I think the same way with a plane, right? If I fill it up with 1,000, 1 trillion liters of fuel, it's not going to take off any better. You need to get the exact right amount of fuel to get it off the runway, and then hopefully no more. And that, I think, if you look through the proposal, it kind of this is really great because it compares it to Velodrome and the OP grants. And I think Velodrome was in one of those cases where it didn't have the same amount of growth that Camelot did without. If you compare both pre emissions, pre any OP grants, and obviously Camelot right now pre any Arbitrum grants, obviously Camelot is in a much better place already, right? So you have more data to work with to see how do these guys use emissions, how do these guys have effectiveness of liquidity and effectiveness of TVL, blah blah blah, and where can you expect that to grow?
How can I ask when honestly you don't have to answer it for sure, but like for example, if you were a voter on this one, how would you vote?
I would be voting. I mean, I'm gonna be, let's say like this, I'm gonna probably be putting my post in the Discord. I mean, in the forum soon, right? Because of course, a vote, if I say yes or no, I think the answer is of course yes from me, but a yes or a no doesn't give as much information as probably like a full-on discussion about everything. And I'm glad everyone is having that, and I'm glad everyone's looking at the numbers and whatever. But I would definitely be voting yes. Yeah.
So just to make some more numbers here, Camelot in their post says that the Arbitrum DAO treasury currently holds 3.5 billion ARB tokens. So
yes.
That's a lot, yeah. So assuming a $352 million or 352 million ARB token distribution a year, over which would provide a 10-year runway, this would come out to 3.4% of the annual budget.
I know, but first of all, this is they're asking this for 6 months, and after these 6 months, they will for sure, especially if the precedent is sent, I don't know how you say it, but especially if it happens, the first one, they will for sure ask again. And other protocols will also want their part as well. I think it can create a lot of antagonism within the community. It will be very interesting to see. And I think that just like Wenmoon is just said, the most interesting part will be what kind of discussion this will raise, because the smart thing by Camelot, one of the smart things they did, they asked for it first. They've put this conversation out there, and they've also threw this number, which is now an anchor, because now even if you try to say, oh no, maybe like when 12 is the first number you hear, then all of a sudden 8, yeah, maybe I don't know if 8 is enough. But if they at first said like, okay, yeah, 3, then we're playing a whole different game, you know what I mean? And I think they did it on purpose. I think they specifically thought of a very high number, and then because they know that now maybe even if they get like a quarter of it, it's still a huge amount of
yeah. And here's the thing, right? Since everybody is kind of thinking in absolute terms rather than anything relative, right? At least what I've seen, most people are saying 12 million big number, right? So even if they said, and even if they started at 3 million, I bet somebody's going to say, well, 3 million is a big number. You know what I mean? It's so literally whatever they put.
That's why they chose 12. You know what I mean?
Well, they're in a rock and a hard place. Like any number they put is basically what I'm saying, you know?
Yeah.
So let's look at the breakdown, right? So 50% of the rewards go to these ecosystem builders. They list all the pairs here. 25% are going to integration partners. Is this actually distributed to these integration partners? I mean, I see Pendle here, who we've had on. But will they just distribute the ARB straight to them?
No, I'm sure it'll.
No. So I think with the integration partners, there's certain things that each of them are doing, right? So for example, with the Pendle is putting PT like
GLP.
Camelot.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So there's like Grail ARB, for example.
Yeah.
That's on Pendle. And then the liquidity pool for that is what would be incentivized by Grail, is what I take that as.
Mm-hmm.
And then like another example, I think there's I don't know which one is the protocol, but there's another one that sort of does like the Unisa V3 management, and I'm sure that's going to be used to help manage their Unisa V3 style LPs, right? And that's another way to make LPing even more efficient. So, you know, it always comes down to that.
Look, my biggest issue with this whole thing is that like we immediately jump into this conversation about like liquidity incentivizing and like all this just like really, really DeFi stuff that like taking a step back, bigger picture, like by its very nature, these kinds of investments from the perspective of Arbitrum are like one-time costs that don't buy any long-term like assets or anything, right? Like in the best case scenario, these 12 million get spent out over 6 months and that provide some like really deep liquidity on long tail assets. And then the hope is just that like Camelot made enough fees in order to keep going, right? Like these types.
Well, no, I mean the hope is that you like increase liquidity TVL in the network from whatever it is to like I don't know 3 to 5x or whatever.
Right. No, but like that, if you do that by paying people, you either need to commit to paying people in perpetuity, or you need to acknowledge that it's going to go away.
Yeah. No, they are that's the whole point, right? Like in my opinion, at least, any emissions schedule for anything ever, if you know the emissions stop and then the plane crashes, that was a failed project, right?
Yeah. So I guess my point on this as like why because like I'm just like on Twitter right now looking at what the reaction to this is, and like what everyone is basically saying is like there's like some really compelling things for yes, and it sounds like the no side is just basically like no, 12 million too much, no, and it's just like I don't know, man. Like from my perspective, if I was Arbitrum, I would be saying like the dollar amount is not the issue. The issue is like conceptually with the type of investment, and I just feel like if I, as an owner of Arbitrum, want to invest in something, I want to know that like I'm not literally like lighting money on fire for 6 months and then hoping after 6 months that the residual warmth remains.
Yeah, so one thing to note about Grail is that since April, its TVL has been in the decline. So maybe the team was looking at their metrics and just kind of thought that they needed to add some liquidity incentives to start competing again. Because if you do look at the Arbitrage ecosystem, you know, they are quite far behind. Like even Curve has more TVL than they do.
I mean, I wouldn't say they're quite far behind.
Well, you mean look, Uniswap V3 has 284 million to Camelot's 78 million.
Right. But I mean, I don't think we can like credibly say like a native DEX on a L2 that's like new and growing should be expected to compete with Uniswap and Aave. Like otherwise, like Tether is 83 billion, Frax is only 1. What a joke. You know, like
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Look, and just to kind of wrap the point up, I think the best thing to kind of show for this proposal is that list that you brought up, right, with all of the ecosystem partners. And the way that I see it is this is not 12 million going to Camelot so they can eat and be fat and happy and whatever, right? This is 12 million that's going to be flowing, that they've literally shown how it's going to be flowing all the way through the ecosystem, right? Every project will be touched by this. So it's not just like these one guys that I see it as. It's everyone gets a piece. Everyone's kind of getting a piece of this giant 12 million pie as everyone's looking at it.
But it's not really everyone, because it's only those who will be working with Camelot. You know what I mean? So in a way, I do see like several sides of it, which I'm not sure exactly are definitely fair for everyone. Because I agree, Camelot is offering something in which they don't pocket any of the money themselves, but they're kind of in control of it and incentivizing the others, and by that strengthening their own statute.
But what's not fair about it?
Because well, if they get it as Camelot, and now as a project, you see that okay, if you want to get a part of it, you should only go through Camelot. So now Camelot has a much bigger competitive advantage to any other DEX who also want to do.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
but and the other DEX will also ask, like, okay, off chain, you gave them such a grant. Why are you not giving us the same grant as well? Don't you want to have like a robust ecosystem with several DEXs that can do all this kind of stuff? That's how I think this is going to roll out.
I will also say the problem is you're always going to get this kind of politics with whatever grant you give. As soon as you give one grant, even if it's $10, someone is going to cry about it, right? As soon as Optimism gave Velodrome the grant and they gave Curve, they shafted Curve, everyone was angry, right? And everyone's going to be angry if it was the other way around, because the Velodrome guys will be angry. Or if it's this way, that way, this way. Someone's going to be angry that they didn't get as much money as the next person, right? And as long as I think, you know, it's a very specific process where you're looking at metrics, and it's not just, I like the yellow coin. If you're looking at, this is the metrics, oh, they have TVL. Sorry, guys, you just don't have the TVL. You just don't have the effectiveness of emissions. You don't have the same track record. You haven't been around as long. Those kind of stuff, I think it's eventually like, sure, someone will be angry, but then, you know, you can be, I think it makes sense from the protocol. I mean, Arbitrage's perspective.
That's it.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think Camelot's doing the right thing in going after this grant. I think that the Arbitrum community, which I don't believe in, I think it's off-chain specifically, but whatever. I think they need to decide if this is like the type of stuff that they want to support. And I think like we as a crypto community need to have like a smarter discussion about like just investments and time horizons and like what you're actually getting for this, and not immediately just jump into like the you know, like the dollar amounts and the who's winning and the fairness of it all. Like we should start with first principles of like, what are we even getting for this? But otherwise, like the point of this industry is for things to happen organically and to happen in front of us. And again, Camelot, like I very much support putting a proposal out there. It seems like everybody that I know and care about in this community is supporting it. And you know, this is what testing and fraud is.
Well, off-chain has $3.5 billion that they got to figure out how to spend to grow Arbitrum and maintain the relevancy. So somebody has to do it. So good for Camelot taking the initiative, putting some numbers out there. They probably should have shot for more. Probably should have done 50 million over a year. Or something. But maybe this is just like a first step. I'm sure they've talked to the off-chain labs before they actually posted this thing. It wouldn't really make sense for them to do it without doing that. So, what do you think, guys? Pass or no pass?
I think it probably passes. I think just based on like what I'm seeing on crypto Twitter, plus the fact that you're right, like Camelot's not dumb and off-chain's not dumb. I'm sure that like there was some sort of alignment before this started. Like I would be surprised to see if it gets shot in the face. And if it does, like I understand it. I totally understand it. And for me, if I were to vote no, and to be clear, I'm not going to vote because the only ARB I have is in a liquidity pool. But if I were to vote no, it would be because like I just don't think that this is like a good way to be doing finance.
Well, that's probably how it's going to end up. All the no votes are probably stuck in liquidity pools because they don't care about governance. And the people that do will be voting yes.
Right. I know. Wait, actually, Sam, that's like pretty fucking profound. Like, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a real reason the DAOs aren't real. Like the people that don't care, that would be like in there, like shooting down bad ideas and like non like personally enriching ideas are like have their assets in ways that they can't get involved.
To be solved by Bear Chain at some point in the future. But that's a different story for a different day. We'll end up before we end up going for 2 hours here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Great conversation. Win fucking carried it today, bro. Thank you. Or lady. Miss.
Appreciate it.
Miss. We'll be back tomorrow.
Monday, no? We'll be back
Monday.
on Monday.
Yeah, exactly.
No, we'll be back.
2 hours. Don't we have to talk?
Indeed. You guys have an interview.
Oh my gosh. We're coming back to talk with Nicolo Bardosia.
With the Italian mafia, right?
The Italian mafia from Risk Finance is coming on to talk about risk, I guess. So we'll see you back then, and see you back soon, Squids, till the tide returns.
Goodbye, folks.